everyone. Thank you for being here today and taking an hour of your day to focus on something that will improve your ability to influence a lot of people fast, and that is your virtual presentation skills. But before we begin today, I want to hear from you. I want you to use the chat. If you've ever been to any of my webinars, you'll know that I ask you a lot of questions, and I really want you to participate in the conversation. So the question I have for you before we start is, what are you hoping to take away from this webinar? So type your answer into the chat. The question is, what are you hoping to take away from the webinar? I want to hear from you. Okay. Hi, Carol. Thank you. Okay. What are you guys hoping to take away? Drop it into the chat, and I want to find out what you're looking for here. Go ahead and drop it into the chat. What are you hoping to take away from the presentation? What are you hoping to take away? Don't be shy. Leilani says techniques to improve teaching online. Okay, perfect. Yeah, you're going to learn a lot that's going to help you do that. Perfect. Okay, what else? Nicole, quick tips and tricks. Okay, you'll get those too. Thanks, Nicole. Who else? A few more people before we get started. What are you hoping to take away? Learning how to present myself virtually. Nice. We're going to do that. And how about one more person? Smoother presenter to possibly present travel info in the future. That is great. Okay, good, you guys. And I'm just setting up one thing about my screen share before we begin today. So many buttons to click all the time. Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So let's get started. We've got so much to cover today in such a short amount of time. So thank you for sharing what you're looking for today. We're going to touch on most, if not all, of these topics in our 1 hour today. And a few logistics, I will be sharing the replay with you in an email following this presentation. So look out for that email. And we'll also, at the end of the session, we will have time for a little bit of Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please save them to the end and we'll get to them then. All right. So if you're in a leadership role, or if you want to be, you have to be able to give a great presentation. And today that means a great virtual presentation. Presentation skills, virtual presentation skills aren't just the skill set of the day, they really are the skill set of the future. But so many people struggle to find confidence on camera. Even though I'm teaching this class today, I used to get incredibly nervous when I was doing presentations. I would sweat a ton. I have ruined so many shirts because of my sweating when doing presentations. I used to talk really, really fast, and I used to talk too much as well. But one day I realized that I was approaching it all wrong. Because I grew up in an opera family, my dad was an opera director, I was viewing giving a virtual presentation as if it were a performance. So no wonder I was nervous. But what I learned over time is that a presentation isn't a performance. A presentation really is about guiding your audience on a journey of understanding. Now, when it comes to giving presentations, I use a lot of what I've learned in my experiences as a teacher. And that means I've learned to focus less on myself and less on my performance and more on you, the audience, and what you need and want. Now, I love giving presentations so much, and I get paid to do it. This is my career now. And I want you to find that confidence in giving presentations too. So today, I'm going to teach you the foundations of how to give a great virtual presentation. And you're going to get grounded in the skill set so that the next time you present on camera, you are confident, you are commanding, and you end your webinar or your meeting knowing that you connected with the people on the other side of your screen. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and get started. So great leaders are great presenters, but finding confidence on camera can be really challenging. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 things that will help make you a more confident virtual presenter. And those 3 things are, first, how to connect with the audience. Second, how to communicate a clear message. And third, some virtual production basics. But before we begin, I want us to zoom out a little bit to see the bigger picture here. Here's a question to help us do that, and I want you to answer in the chat again. So when you step onto that virtual stage as a presenter, what roles are you assuming? In other words, what hats are you wearing when you are a virtual presenter? Go ahead and type your answer into the chat. What do you think? What roles are you assuming as a virtual presenter? Drop your answer into the chat so I can see if we're all on the same page with this. Okay, you're leading the conversation, right? So maybe you're like a facilitator. Great, thanks, Carol. Susan says a teacher, exactly. Yeah, what else? An expert for sure, Christine. SG says subject matter expert, community member, right? Okay, great. Yeah, so as a virtual presenter, you are a technician, definitely, that is true. All right, as a virtual presenter, I see 3 main roles. One is you're definitely a teacher. Second is you're an entertainer, whether you like it or not. And third, you're also a guide. And what's important to remember is that as a presenter, you have an audience that you are responsible for. You're responsible for guiding them on this journey of understanding. And this is key to understand because focusing more on your audience and less on yourself will help you find the confidence that you're looking for. So that's why the first thing we're going to talk about today is how to connect with the audience. So here's a recent statistic that might shock you. 4 out of 5 professionals shifted their attention away from the presenter during the last presentation they attended. That's a lot, 4 out of 5 people. And that means most likely that someone has tuned out of one of your presentations too. The thing about virtual presentations, of course, is that people are distracted, right? They're emailing, they're texting. That means you have to engage them right away, and then you have to keep that connection. Now, most people start their presentations by saying, hi, I'm Rebecca, I do blah, 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 and they introduce themselves, and they usually spend a lot of time in this section. Well, I don't want you to do that. You want to connect with the audience as soon as possible. It's not a monologue about who you are. So here's how you do that. You want to connect with your audience by inviting their voices into the room right away. So what does this mean? Well, I asked a question when I started the webinar, not before I started, so it's not about where are you from, but I asked a question right when I started the webinar. Who remembers what that question is? I asked everyone to answer in the chat. Do you remember what that question was? So if you answered, what are you hoping to take away from this webinar? Then you're right. I start almost all my webinars this way. I start a lot of meetings this way too. I asked you that question to get your voice in the room as quickly as possible. Now, why is it important to do that? It's important to ask people to raise their voices right away, because as a presenter, if I don't do that, my audience is going to hide. They're just going to hide and they're not going to be engaged. It's been shown that if you don't sustain a continual expectation of meaningful involvement, participants will retreat into that alluring observer role. It's like watching TV, right? TV, it feels kind of good. It's passive, but that's not what we want. We don't want observers, we want participants in our presentations. So once you establish that connection with your audience by getting them to speak up right at the beginning, then you have to keep that connection throughout your presentation. And there is a best practice here. It's called the 5-minute rule. The 5-minute rule says, never go longer than 5 minutes without engaging the audience in some way. So if you follow the 5-minute rule for a 15-minute presentation, you have 2 to 3 engagement opportunities with your audience. That means 2 to 3 brief, well-defined, and meaningful things for the audience to do. I go into detail about this I go into detail about all the ways you can connect with the audience in my on-demand course, the Virtual Presentation Skills Bootcamp. And if you're curious about the course, you can check it out. I'll drop the link in the chat for you right now. And it'll give you a lot of different ways to connect with the audience. So, okay, so we're talking about connecting with the audience. And to review, and I like to do this too because I'm a teacher at heart, what is the first way we connect with the audience? We just talked about it. What is the first thing I want you to do? What is the first thing I want you to do when you start your presentation or your meeting? Yes, Annalette, great. I hope I said your name correctly. Anne Lynette, maybe. Yeah, invite their voices into the room right away, often with a question, right? And another way to gauge your audience is to then ask questions throughout your talk. It seems really simple, but a lot of people forget to do this critical thing. It's really tempting to think that your presentation is like giving a performance, right? But that's really not true. And thinking about your presentation as a performance is the reason why so many people get really nervous. So what I want you to remember is that a presentation is actually, it's a two-way conversation between you and your audience, even though you often can't hear them or see them. It has to be a two-way conversation. And asking questions transforms that one-way speech into a conversation because it asks listeners to reflect on their own lives, and that makes it interesting for them. Presenters on the TED stage typically ask about 2 questions a minute, and this is best practice when giving a virtual presentation too, whether or not you're having them answer in the chat. So we've talked about connecting with the audience. The first way was to invite their voices into the room right away. The second way was to what? The second way was to what? What's the second one? Yeah, ask questions. Exactly. Just keep asking questions. Keep asking questions. And another way to engage the audience is to conduct a poll. Polls are really simple. We're going to conduct one right now so that you can get the experience of that. So we launched a poll, and I want you to answer this question. Go ahead and vote. What's the biggest struggle you have with giving virtual presentations? Can't communicate a clear message? You struggle to engage the audience, or communicating confidence on camera. So right now we've got 46% of you participated, a little more than half now. So far, communicating confidence on camera is number 1. Okay, and we've got a few more people waiting to answer. But you'll see that creating a poll is a great way to use technology because it's a fast and easy way for the audience to participate, and it keeps them engaged, which is what you want. All right, great. So I'm going to end the poll. Looks like the clear winner is communicating confidence on camera. All right, thanks everyone for voting in that poll. So last fall I did a presentation for a large global team at Google. And what I did was I started the presentation by running a poll to gauge their thoughts on the topic that we were going to be talking about. And it was really a great way to start because it gave everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions, and it got us all on the same page really fast. Another way to engage the audience is by mixing facts and stories. So the truth is, no one wants to sit through an hour presentation on every fact you've ever learned about your topic. They just don't. Truth be told, facts are mind-numbing. And so people need stories to make meaning from facts. Facts, they pile up and they just don't make much sense after a while. We need something to connect them all together, and stories are what do that. And that's why great presenters are great storytellers. So do you know why stories are so powerful? There's been a lot of talk about stories these days. I'm sure you've heard a lot of statistics, maybe some science about stories. What do you know about why stories are so powerful? Go ahead and type it into the chat. Thank you, Carol. So why are stories so powerful? Nicole says transferring emotions. Jacqueline, connection, definitely. Yeah, more memorable. They capture the imagination. They make things more human. Yeah, exactly. So all these things are true. You guys are well on the way. So people are, this is one of my favorite statistics about stories, people are 22 times more likely to remember a data point when it's wrapped inside of a story. That's incredible. And I would highly recommend, if you want to be teaching online, or if you work at a company, you manage a team and you want people to remember something, wrap it in a story. So for example, I was working with a client who was asked to give a work presentation on the results of an employee engagement survey. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking, oh my God, what a dry topic. And it could be, but stories make things interesting. So I coached her to share a short story about her own life working at home since COVID and how that has increased her engagement at work. And not only did this liven up the topic, but it gave the audience a window into who she is as a person, which then created an emotional connection with her. What I want you to remember here is that we are not robots, and you want the audience to feel something, even if you're sharing a lot of information. It's not that we have two kinds of presentations, one that's all information and one that's all stories. No, you want to mix them together, okay? So I'm sure you're wondering, well, okay, but why does my audience need to feel something? Why is that important? Well, it's important. It's science, because audiences are more likely to receive new information once an emotional pathway has been created. So in essence, stories are like Trojan horses, because stories stimulate this oxytocin release that creates trust, connection, and empathy. And then once the audience feels something, then we can endeavor to change what they know or what they believe. So start with the heart and then go to the head. Mixing facts and stories is another way to create a connection with the audience. But I get this question all the time: where can I use stories in my presentations? So here are a couple of recommendations for where to use stories in a virtual presentation. First, you want to use a story as a hook at the beginning of your presentation to connect with your audience. Just like I started my presentation today with that really short story about how I used to struggle with giving presentations, that made it more interesting for you because you got a sense of who I was as a person. If I had launched into my content immediately, you wouldn't have been as engaged to listen to me as a human being sharing something with you. You can also use stories to break up dense areas of informational content. Sure, we all have to share a lot of content, but you want to break it up with stories. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was coaching a client, his name was Joe, to present in front of a live audience of 500 people in San Francisco. And he needed to raise money from investors about a material he had invented. So I asked him to run through his presentation so we could work on it together. And his presentation sounded a lot like this. It was full of complicated science talk. There was no emotion. There was no story. And it was really, honestly, it was boring, and I was super confused. So together, we worked to remove some of the complicated scientific language and tell a story about how what he'd invented would save old growth forests for future generations. It was emotional, it was powerful, and it was very well received. So storytelling is such an important skill to master. And there's really so much that we could say about it. I could do multiple webinars about storytelling, but we don't have time to go into all that today. But you can find more information about that in the online course link that I shared with you, which I'll share in the follow-up email as well. So we've talked about how finding ways to connect with the audience is the first way to feel and also project more confidence when you're giving a virtual presentation. The second key to finding more confidence as a virtual speaker is making sure you communicate a clear message. Aristotle, one of the greatest orators in history, said it best. He said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. It sounds really simple, but giving a clear presentation that everyone in the audience can follow takes discipline. How many times have you tuned into a webinar and the speaker just rambles for an hour? Has this happened to you? If so, type yes into the chat. I'm curious how many people. How many times have you tuned into a webinar? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. All yeses, no no's so far. Maybe even you're guilty of this, okay? It's really far too common, and it's a shame because when you do this, you're wasting your opportunity to influence people on the virtual stage. So how can you make sure you're communicating a clear message? Well, the first step to communicating a clear message is to organize your talk around something called a controlling idea. Your controlling idea is your main idea. In other words, it's what you're going to talk about. You have to define a controlling idea and state it at the beginning of your presentation so people know what's coming. And then you want to state it at the end of your presentation to remind them what it was about. A controlling idea is three things, and this is how you can create a controlling idea. A controlling idea is concise. Controlling idea is a complete sentence, and it is also interesting. Here's an example of a controlling idea. Great leaders are great presenters. This is the controlling idea for my presentation today. And everything in my talk is talking about how to be a great presenter, okay? So remember, a controlling idea is three things. It is concise, it's a complete sentence, and it's interesting. Here are a few more examples of controlling ideas. Another example, new leadership development is crucial for fast-growing companies, okay? Another example could be being able to tell a story will help you succeed in business. So concise, complete sentence, interesting. Here are some examples of controlling ideas that don't work. And I want you to tell me why they don't work. I want you to answer in the chat. Why don't they work? So here's the first one. Tacos are from Mexico. Why does this not work as a controlling idea? Type your answer into the chat. Why does this not work? I'm going to do a presentation about tacos are from Mexico. Why does it not work? So remember, it has to be concise, complete sentence, and it has to be interesting. So why does this not work? Okay, Christine got it first. Not interesting. Yes, it's common knowledge. Exactly. So it's not interesting. No one's going to listen to a presentation about this. All right. Here's another example. Insects as a food source. What's wrong with this controlling idea? Why does it not work? Who can type it into the chat? Yeah, and Lynette, right? It's an incomplete sentence. Great. I see this so many times. This is the biggest mistake I see people making is they say, for example, I'm going to do a presentation about climate change. Okay, climate change what? Like, what's your position on climate change? What do you believe about climate change? What are you going to tell me about climate change? Make a complete sentence, okay? So insects as a food source is not a complete sentence. That's why it doesn't work. Third, comparing languages worldwide, Japanese is the easiest language to learn because the characters make it easy to remember. Why doesn't this work as a controlling idea? Yeah, right. Not concise. It's not concise. You want your audience to be able to remember your controlling idea, if at all possible. So you want it to be concise, right? Nailing down a controlling idea is sometimes the hardest thing to do when preparing a presentation. But if you don't do this crucial first step to clarifying your message, your audience won't get what you're trying to communicate. Your controlling idea is the first part of the virtual presentation messaging framework that will help you communicate this clear message. The next part of the framework is the problem. Now, I got this one from this guy. You may know him. His name is Donald Miller, and he's from a company called StoryBrand. And he says that every presentation should start with a problem. If there's no problem, then there's no real interest for the audience to pay attention to you. Just like in the first several minutes of any film, we're presented with the main character and then also a problem that she must solve, or multiple problems that she must solve. The rest of the film then is about her trying to solve those problems, and you're on the edge of your seat because you want to know if she does. So let's take an example. Who remembers this film? What's the name of this film? Who can be first to get it? You might date yourself by naming this film. Who knows? Speed. Okay, Christine, you're the first. Nice job. So the main characters have a lot of problems to solve, right? The main problem is there's a bomb on the bus and they have to defuse it. So will they defuse the bomb? That's the first question we're on the edge of our seats waiting to hear. We also want to know, oh, are they going to fall in love? They kind of like each other. We're also paying attention because we want to know that. And then finally, just will they even survive? This is kind of crazy what they're doing right now. So there are all these problems that make us pay attention. Right? So just like in any good film, every presentation must give the audience a problem to solve, or else they will lose interest. So I want to give you some examples of problems with their matching controlling ideas, because a controlling idea and a problem, they work together like a set. And I'll show you what I mean. So for example, controlling idea. Great leaders are great presenters. Again, this is the controlling idea for my presentation. What's the problem then? Well, many people struggle to find confidence in front of the camera. Okay, so you're going to listen to my presentation because you want to know how to solve that problem for yourself. Another example, controlling idea. New leadership development is critical for fast-growing companies. But what's the problem? There aren't efficient ways to train new leaders at scale. And then this could be the beginning of a pitch to VCs for a new app or product, for example. Okay, see how they fit together? Here's another example. Controlling idea is being able to tell a story will help you succeed in business. And then there's a but. Of course, the but is always the problem, but we have forgotten how to tell stories. And then this presentation could be a sales pitch for a storytelling course, for example. So don't forget to get clear on that controlling idea first, and then make it interesting by presenting a problem. This is the key to communicating a clear message in any presentation. So we've talked about how being a confident presenter requires connecting with the audience and also communicating a clear message. So the last point that we're going to cover today is virtual production basics and how they will increase your confidence when presenting in front of the camera. The first thing you need to know about virtual production basics is that video is a flattening medium. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what the hell does that mean? So it means that when you are pushing your image through a camera, when you're using a camera and you're creating video, the camera naturally strips away some of your natural vibrance and energy. It's just what the camera does. And you end up looking a little bit like this when you go on camera. So that means you need to work a little harder to make sure you're coming through the camera more like this, okay? Looking engaging and energetic and also authentic, of course. So question for you, how many of you struggle with being engaging on camera? Is this a problem for you? Do you watch videos of yourself and say, oh God, I can't believe I'm just so not engaging? Okay, so SG says yes, Richard Gold says yes. Okay, yeah, I hear this all the time. You're really not alone. It's a very common problem. So with that in mind, I'm going to teach you how to up-level your presence for the camera, and also some behind the scenes tricks to really help you present with more professionalism. First, we'll start with some tips for presence. The most important thing that you need to know about presenting on camera is that you need 10% more energy on camera than even when you're doing a talk in person. You need 10% more energy. And one of the reasons why you need 10% more energy on camera is because the camera strips away some of your energy naturally, but also you don't have the energy from the audience that you're getting. If you're doing a live presentation, you've got an audience full of people, you're automatically getting a ton of energy from them just being in the room looking at you. And that's why some people, I know I shake a lot when I present in person because it's hard to channel all that energy through your body. But on camera, you can't see people. So generally, you're going to be a little flatter than if you are in person. So you need 10% more energy so that you come off as more engaging. Now, one way to access more energy is to stand up when you're presenting. Just like I'm doing right now. I'm standing up. I could easily go off the screen if I wanted to because I'm standing up. And I've worked with so many people who give presentations all the time in their companies for their teams. And generally, when I start working with them, they're always sitting down. And no wonder their presentations aren't engaging. It's really important to engage your body, engage your core when you're talking. You're going to get a lot of energy from your legs. And you're going to be more nimble and you're going to be able to use your body language better when you stand up. So I recommend setting up your presentation station so you can stand up while you're giving your talk. Here is a photo of the way my office used to look like for giving presentations. You'll notice I have a standing desk. I have my computer propped up on a bunch of books. I've got my mic and my lighting. And look, it's not pretty, but that's behind the scenes. You just want what's in the camera frame to look good. It doesn't matter what's going on behind the scenes. You just need to orchestrate it so that you can be standing up. Also notice that the camera here is at eye level, which is a really important thing when you're presenting to appear more confident and make it feel like you're having a conversation with your audience, even if you can't see them. Another way to communicate more energy when you present is to use your hands to gesture. Now, I'm going to show you an example. This might be a little bit meta, but this is an example of what it looks like when you are presenting slides in a virtual presentation. Your on-camera real estate goes down to about 15% of the screen and your slides are huge. So that means you need to be more expressive than you would normally be. And you only have the small box, your upper body, to do that expressing for you. You can see in this video that I'm going to show you that I'm using gestures for almost every other word. And it's helping me communicate with a lot more expressiveness. It makes me more watchable because we generally like to watch things that move. Okay, that's why you have a lot of animated ads these days. It's because people are drawn to movement. So when you move your body, it makes people watch you more. It's easier to watch you. If you're not used to using your hands to gesture when you talk, then try identifying 3 gestures that you can use and then bounce back and forth between them. You can increase your vocabulary, your gesture vocabulary as you go over time. Here are some examples of gestures that I use a lot and that work for me. Finally, the most important way to easily communicate more energy on camera is tip number 3, to smile more. Smile more. It's really easy to look serious when you're on camera. So you have to train yourself to smile more when you're talking. Now, of course, you don't need to be smiling all the time, but your default should be an engaged smile with your eyes. Of course, it's hard to smile with your teeth while you're speaking. So I like to coach people to open your eyes a little bit wider. Imagine you're shooting energy out of your eyeballs. Just open them a little bit wider and give people a smile with your eyes. You remember when we were all wearing masks, no one could see your face. So you kind of had to use your eyes a little bit more. So I want you to imagine maybe that you're using a mask, if that will help you. So I'm going to share with you 2 videos I made to demonstrate the impact of using 10% more energy and smiles. In this first video, I am using 10% more energy and I'm smiling with my eyes. And in the second video, I'm saying the exact same thing, but I'm not using that energy and I'm not smiling. Now, I want you to notice how they differ.
Video is a flattening medium, which means you need 10% more energy and lots more smiles if you want to be watchable.
Okay, so that was video 1. Now here's video 2. You'll notice I'm sitting down in a chair. Now I want you to know I'm not trying to be boring here. I'm just speaking as if I were normally speaking in a room with a friend.
Video is a flattening medium. That means you need 10% more energy and more smiles if you want to be watchable.
Okay, so which video is more engaging to you? The first video or the second video? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Carol says number 1. Okay, getting a lot of 1s. Yeah, well, it's not surprising. So again, standing up, more energy, smiling with your eyes. It's going to make you more watchable, more engaging for your audience, and also more professional. All right. So now that we've talked about how you can up-level your presence, now let's focus on how to make your presentation a little more professional. So here is someone on a Zoom call. Just by taking this picture here, and I want you to share one word in the chat for the story of this picture. What is the story this man is communicating with his background? Okay, Christine says messy. Great, just one word. Carol says he's a bro. Okay, Leilani says sleepy, casual, sad. Okay, great. So all of these are pretty negative words, right? He's not engaged. Someone in another webinar, they said, oh, he's single, which I thought was interesting. Another thing that's interesting about this image is that the door is open, which makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm wondering what's going to come through that door. Okay, so what is the point here? Well, the point is that when you're giving a presentation on camera, you need to know that everything says something. Everything that's in your camera frame says something about you, whether you want it to or not. That's why when you're giving a virtual presentation or in a virtual meeting, you need to dress your set a bit with some texture that helps tell the story that you want to tell. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. So here is an example trailer from Masterclass, and this is Neil Gaiman's trailer for his Masterclass. If you don't know Neil Gaiman, he writes short fiction. He also writes novels and comics. He wrote American Gods and Coraline. So you can see here, he is in a kind of a dark library. He's wearing all black. He's, a little messed with his hair and he's wearing glasses. So all of this is intentional because he writes about mystery and he writes about magic. So his set and his clothing is telling that story. In contrast, here is Malcolm Gladwell's trailer for his masterclass. If you don't know Malcolm Gladwell, he's also a writer, but he's a sociologist. He's a social psychologist. So he writes about research on human behavior. So they're both writers, but their backgrounds are very different. His tells the story of science and research, where Neil Gaiman's tells the story of mystery and magic. Okay, notice how the background helps communicate these things about the speaker. And it also makes the camera frame more interesting, and it gives us some depth of field. So there's something to look at besides our face. One of the things I've seen the most is when people are doing a presentation, they're just standing in front of a white wall, and it's quite boring. And you don't want to do that because then people are focusing all their attention on your face. So here again is this video that I shot in my office. And you'll notice that the background here is telling a story that's creative, it's colorful, it's clean. The plants make it feel alive. So I want you to always consider your background because it is telling a story about you, whether you want it to or not. Finally, the last thing I want to share with you about how to make your virtual production more professional is this. You need to rehearse. You need to rehearse. Confidence in presenting doesn't just happen. You actually have to work at it. And giving a great virtual presentation takes more effort than giving a presentation in person because you have to consider so many things. Not only you have to keep the audience engaged when they're distracted, but you also have to figure out what your message is. You have to figure out your production elements like your background and what you're going to wear. And then you have to put it all together and deliver it on Zoom or Google Meets, whatever platform you choose. And all that tech is a lot to deal with as well. So it's a lot, and a lot can go wrong. As I said before, a virtual presentation isn't a performance, but it is like a performance in that you have to prepare yourself. So you have to rehearse. One question I always get about this is, well, should I use a script? I literally get this question every time I give this presentation. And my answer is always, yes, you should use a script. But of course, you have to understand how to deliver your presentation without sounding scripted, because then you're just reading and nobody wants that. So I encourage presenters to use what I call a script table. So you'll notice on the right, this is a script table. What are some of the things you notice by looking at this script table here? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. What do you notice in that script table? What are you seeing about that script table? Graphic SA, I'm not sure what that means, Leilani. Space, okay, yeah. Notice that in my script, there's a lot of space around the words, around the sentences. That is because when I am using my script, right now I'm using a script, and it is right below my camera. So I'm constantly glancing down at my script and then I'm looking back at the camera. If I had really dense paragraphs of content, I would never be able to find where I was again. So I need to break it up so I can easily glance down, grab what I need, and then say it while I'm looking into the camera, making eye contact with you. So that's a great point. Yeah, so I've got my graphics on the left. I always know what slide I'm on and what I'm supposed to be saying on that slide. It's a bullet point style, exactly. And that's, again, it's about space. I don't want to have huge paragraphs because then I'm reading, right? I don't want to be reading. Bold words. Yeah, Susan says I have some bold words. These are the words I want to emphasize because, again, if we're reading, then we sound really flat. So I need to know which words I need to hit more strongly so that it's interesting for you to listen to me. Okay, you'll also know, let me see. Yeah, you'll know it's at the top right where it says chat and it's highlighted. I do this because I highlight all my audience engagement opportunities, so I know that I have enough. So when I'm planning my presentation, I already know what I want to say. And then, so I've mapped it all out in, usually this is my process. I think everybody has a different process, but it's interesting to learn other people's processes. When I'm planning a presentation, first I always do pen and paper and I'm trying to figure it out. What do I actually want to say? What ideas do I want to share? How should I organize them? Then only once I'm clear with that, including my controlling idea and the problem, then I move to the computer. Then I write my script. I do not even think about slides first. A lot of people make that mistake. They build their whole deck of slides and then it's like, oh, now I have to say things about the slides. And often they forget their entire outline and what they're trying to communicate. So always write your script first, and then it'll be very clear where you need a slide, where you need to change the visual because what you're saying has changed. So I add in the highlighted audience engagement opportunities because literally I'm thinking about them as an ingredient to my presentation. I know I need to have one about every 2 pages when it's laid out in a script table like this. And if I don't, I need to add them in. Okay, so that's the way I keep myself honest, because there's a lot to do and there's a lot to forget. So using a script table is how I keep myself on track, and it's how I am able to deliver more professionally. So again, I go into detail about the script table, about all kinds of things in my boot camp. I encourage you to check it out. I'll send that link in the follow-up email so you can check it out and see if you want to go deeper in this skill set. All right, so today we have covered so much. We have covered, well, first we've decided, we've understood and agreed that great leaders are great presenters. And that's why today we covered the foundational skill set that starts with how to connect with the audience. And then you learned how to communicate a clear message. And you've also learned some virtual production basics. So I want to hear from you. What is one thing you've taken away from being here today? Go ahead and type it into the chat. What's one thing you've taken away from being here today? Go ahead and type it into the chat. We'll have time for Q&A right at the end, so I encourage you to save your questions for the end. But right now, what's one thing you've taken away? To stay, okay, Leilani, stage my background. Lilia says 10% more energy, script first, stand up while presenting, controlling ideas, smile, script table, more energy with the script. Okay, perfect, great. That makes me happy that you guys are taking so much away from being here today. And if you want to go deeper, and bring more training like this maybe to your team, then I encourage you to sign up for a free 30-minute consult with me. You can see the link is right there, and I'm going to drop it into the chat right now. I work with teams all over the world, especially remote distributed teams who have to present virtually a lot. And I do group training, workshops, and one-on-one coaching as well. So connect with me. We'll talk about what your struggles are, what the struggles of your team or your company are, and we'll build a plan so you can up-level your team in this way. All right, so we have a little bit of time left for some Q&A, but while we're doing that, I also want you, thanks for telling me that, Leilani. I see. Yeah, I did not have it sending to everybody. 1 second, and I will drop that link in the chat. Thanks for letting me know. See, a lot of things can go wrong, can't they? Okay, there's the link to the 30-minute consultation. Again, I encourage you to reach out to me. Let me help you. Let me help your company and your team more. And in addition, before we go into Q&A, there is a quick survey. I would love for you to fill out the survey to let me know how this presentation was for you, what you got out of it, how it could be better, what you want more of. That really helps us make these webinars more valuable to you. So thank you for taking the time to fill out that quick survey. All right, and so we've got a little bit of time. I'm happy to stick around until the top of the hour. So let me know what your questions are. Go ahead and type your question into the chat. I am happy to answer whatever questions you may have. And you'll notice one thing that I love to point out is that I always have some water when I'm presenting. And sure, okay, probably everybody has water when they're presenting, but you'll notice that when I was asking you guys questions, I would always take a drink of water while I was waiting for the answer to come in. That does a couple of things. Number one, it allows me to take a drink of water, but number two, just having this as a prop helps me relax while I'm waiting for you. And nobody's going to fault you for having water because everybody needs water when they're talking. Okay, so that's something I like to point out. Okay, Dan says, how many script sheets do you use in an hour presentation? Well, I don't know, but let's count. I would imagine it's roughly 14. So this is my script for today. You'll see this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll spare you me counting. Yeah, I would say it's roughly, I would say it's 14 to 20. You'll probably notice that I use a lot of slides. I think I must have 70 slides in this presentation, an hour-long presentation, because I know that the more I advance slides, the more it keeps people engaged. Again, it's this, it's the reptilian brain having change and having movement keeps our eyes focused. We don't want people staring at one slide for too long. It's just boring. So I like to advance my slides quite a bit. Okay. Jacqueline says, bye, Carol. Thank you. All right. Jacqueline says, what do we do after we attempt to engage the audience with the question and there are no responses or participation? Yes. So that can happen. One of the reasons why that happens sometimes is because the audience senses that you're not quite engaged in asking the question, which means that maybe you asked it in a bit of a hesitant way because you were afraid that they wouldn't answer. And so then they don't answer because they're not sure if you actually want them to answer. So I've definitely done presentations before, actually the same presentation, where sometimes the audience, it's just crickets out there. And you learn pretty quickly if that's the case. And if that's the case, then you have to adjust your strategy a little. So even today, I had a lot of questions that I often wait for the audience to answer. You guys are a great audience. You actually answered a lot of questions. At the beginning, I wasn't so sure. So I definitely waited for that first question for you guys to answer. What are you hoping to take away? But I think only 3 or 4 people answered. I'm not sure. So I was a little like, oh God, are they not going to engage with me? So instead of asking every question and wanting you to put your answer in the chat for every question, I asked some questions that I just made rhetorical. I just moved through them. I still asked the question, but I didn't wait for the answer. So you definitely have to gauge your audience a little bit. If they are not really responding the way you want them to, then maybe dial it back a bit. But more than anything, you need to go in guns blazing and just say like, right, okay, you guys, like answer this question. Because if you don't do that, they won't think that you're serious. Okay, and then you can't have that conversation with them. All right, great. Okay, last name King. Wow, I apologize, I cannot say your name. Blathnaid. Wow, that is such an interesting name. Do you have any tips for rehearsing presentations? Should we record ourselves? Yes, that is a great question. Yes, record yourself doing a presentation. I don't do that anymore, but sometimes I do subcontracting work for other companies and I will record myself and then send them the recording so they can make sure that everything's good. Before I start a presentation, before I logged on today, I'm on camera, I am recording, and I'm running through a few slides, not the whole thing, just to check, how does my background look? How's my lighting? Is the sound good? All these things. Definitely do that. If you are not doing presentations all the time, then yes, make that part of your rehearsal schedule. Record yourself rehearsing, maybe then share that video with someone and say, hey, am I engaging? Do you want to participate? Is my message clear? Okay. It's a great way to really test yourself. That's something I do with clients too, is we'll record them saying something and then we'll watch the recording together and I'll give them feedback and then they'll do it again. All right. Great question. Celia says, can you show the list of all the points you covered? Yeah, Celia, great. So I'm going to send a PDF in the follow-up to this this presentation, and I'll have all my points listed there. So thank you for that. Jacqueline, thank you, very helpful. Thank you, Jacqueline. And Leilani, would it be good to request answer through chat as well as voice response? Okay, that's a great question, Leilani. So having people unmute themselves, it's great and it can also be problematic. So when, for example, you have a large audience, for example, I think 87 people signed up for this webinar today. We only have 28 people on here, but other people will watch the recording later. So knowing that I was going to have, maybe not 87, but maybe 50, I was not going to ask people to raise their voices. And here's why. Because if you get people to unmute themselves and answer a question, it takes a little bit of time, and it kind of slows the presentation down. Because let's be honest, we don't always have clear points. And so sometimes we're trying to figure out, what is this person trying to say? So that's one thing. It slows your presentation down. And when you have that many people, you have to keep the presentation going. So that's why when if I have more than 20 people in a webinar, I'm probably not going to ask people to unmute themselves and share. Now, if it's a workshop or a class, then yes, it's very interactive. I'm getting people to unmute themselves all the time and answer questions. Another thing about having people unmute themselves and answer questions is that sometimes people just go on and on. You ask a question and then they talk forever, and then you have to interrupt them. You have to take back the mic, because if you don't, they're going to hijack your whole presentation. You can't do that. So you have to be ready to do that. All right. So I would say a good rule of thumb is, if you have a really big audience, and especially if it's a webinar, use chat. If it's a smaller audience, it's nice to create a more intimate feeling in the room, and then you can have people unmute themselves, because if it's only 5 people, you can have a conversation. You can slow it down a little bit. So I hope that's helpful. BL, what do you think of virtual backgrounds for presentations and meetings? Well, yeah, virtual backgrounds are really distracting to me. I don't necessarily want to see the Golden Gate Bridge hovering behind your head. I generally feel like if someone has a virtual background, they're trying to hide something. And it doesn't give you a window into who they are as a person. Imagine that Neil Gaiman masterclass or the Malcolm Gladwell masterclass trailer with a virtual background. You probably wouldn't want to buy their class, because you're kind of like, what are they hiding, right? Or what's that fuzzy line? They couldn't afford the production, the props and things like that. So I think virtual backgrounds were a solution to the chaos of COVID. And we've had time now to set up our spaces so that they're more inviting, they're more human. Virtual environments are really exhausting. So I would ask yourself, what do I want to communicate? And if you can get a virtual environment to do that for you in a really human way, then go for it. But I would always say, make it real. It's more interesting for people that way. Okay. All right. Christine, thank you. You're welcome. And SG, there are trust and distraction issues. Yes, the bobbing, floating head. Yeah, exactly. All of that. It's very real. It's very real. Okay. Any other questions? We've got 2 more minutes until we log off and get back to our days. Anybody else? Anybody else? Thank you, Celia. Okay. And I encourage you guys, I am going to drop this back into the chat. Again, 30-minute consultation, bring me into your company, allow me to help you train your team. This is important stuff. Presentations are really important because you're trying to communicate with people. And if you're not doing it well, then your message is going to get lost, and then it's just a waste of time for everybody. So really use these tips and bring more aliveness and engagement and vibrancy and energy to what you're communicating. And you're going to have so much more, not only success, but you're going to have more fun doing it too. Okay. All right. Time to go visit those tacos from Mexico for lunch. Oh, tacos, that sounds so good. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off too. So great being with all of you today, and break a leg on your next presentation. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.